Hey, what is up, PCS fans? Well, I guess I should say MSI fans now, because we're here bringing you our MSI preview and prediction show for 2022. Hey, everybody, I'm Pyrotechnics. I'm joined by Nightstar. You might recognize us from the PCS broadcast for the spring split, but we are here to preview all of our teams for MSI, including our beloved PSG Talon. Frank, how stoked are you for this show to get on the road May 10th? It's so soon, so close we can taste it.
Absolutely. Right around the corner, just a little over a week away. And finally, we get that international gameplay we've all just been waiting for. Of course, because of the regional leagues, we just don't get to see enough. But this is going to be that big first preview. And man, there's definitely a lot of big time names coming back to that international stage.
Absolutely. Now that you mention it, why don't we go ahead and take a look at our teams that will be playing in MSI this year? So many big names, but also a few, I think, newcomers to the stage and some new players as well. But we have our three groups drawn. All 11 teams are ready to go, ready to rock the rift, as it were. And up in Group A, of course, we have T1, kind of the heirs apparent. Everybody's been talking them up, but they're joined by the VCS's Saigon Buffalo, Team A's as well. Detonation Focus Me in Group B. We get to have a little bit of a rematch, maybe a grudge match. RNG, PSG Talon. They're going to be joined by Istanbul Wildcats and Red Canids. And then down there in Group C, that's the shorter one, but it's going to be an EU versus NA rivalry. Always a good time. And throw a little bit of OS in there for good measure. So that's G2 Esports, Evil Geniuses, and Order. So those are our 11 squads. Of course, because of the odd number of teams, the format is going to look a little bit different this year. And we are going to see it play out with quite a lot of round robins, it seems.
Yeah, and I mean, just taking a look at initial groups, of course, the highlight has to be T1, but comically, all of the main English speaking regions are actually all concentrated into Group C. So it is going to be, one of the Western teams taking an L early on, but we will have two Western teams represented in the Rumble stage at least.
I mean, yeah, that's true. I suppose if you are a Western League of Legends fan, it's kind of a little bit of a give and take in that way. And I'm really curious to see how Group C in particular shakes out. I do think that EG really impressed quite a bit in the LCS
Mhm,
finals, but so did G2 Esports, even though they're no strangers to this stage. I think Group B could be very competitive.
mhm.
Where PSG are, of course, the team that everybody here in the PCS will be rooting for. RNG, they've of course made some shifts up. We'll get into the preview to talk about that. I am really curious to see what the Istanbul Wildcats and Red Canids can do as well.
Mhm.
And of course, in Group A, yeah, T1 is certainly going to be the squad that everyone's got their eyes on. But I think Saigon Buffalo has a big chip on their shoulder to try and prove they, really deserve to be here, even though they weren't the ones to win the finals. Gigabyte Marines, of course, competing in the Asian games
Mhm.
means that the second place team from the VCS is going to be attending here. In addition, Detonation Focus Me, great showing at Worlds last year. I think this is a team that still has some things to prove with some changes to their roster. We'll see how they do. But let's take a look at the format. Let's take a look at when the matches are going to be played out. We will start with the group stages May 10th to May 15th. And that, of course, starts with Group A. You see T1 up there at the top. And then after that, the Rumble stage, this is when things start to get a little interesting after those double round robins because the top two teams from each group will be playing in one gigantic group and it's another double round robin. It feels like there's a lot of opportunities here for teams to bounce up and down.
Yeah, should be a really, really fun time. Definitely the initial group stage into the Rumble stage. Not only does it give an opportunity to showcase what you have in just the group stage, but for the other teams that are able to make it into the Rumble stage, that's so much extra elite scrims and elite competition that they'll then have to bring back into their own region. So this is definitely a stage that you want to get to for more than just, well, we want to represent our region, we want to win, but just making it there is a massive, massive boon to then just snowball back into your home region.
For sure. And the teams that can make it past that stage into the final four, of course, get into actual best ofs, the semifinals taking place May 27th and May 28th. That is going to be all best of fives to make it into the grand finals on that Sunday, May 29th, to see who will be the champion of this year's midseason invitational. So, really excited to see how this one shakes out. We have all of our contenders. Nice start. I think it's time for us to get into the actual predictions and talking about the matchups that we're going to see in our group stages. So, why don't we kick things off and start with the big one? That is group number one, group A, if you will, in alphabetical order. And it's going to start with a T, T1, formerly SKT, if you want to go back a few years. This is a squad that has been absolutely tearing it up in the LCK. And I think just about everybody is looking at this squad as a favorite. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, when we look at Group A, it should be far and away T1's Group 2 lose. Um, just because not only is the talent just there, there's also a massive experience uh, gap, at least when you look at T1, even though they have a bunch of new players, you still have Faker. Like that hasn't changed, and so the core and the one that can kind of hold down the fort, I mean, it's the demon king himself. So I don't think this group should be an issue for T1. And at the same time, DFM, I also think that they should have an advantage in coming out second in this group. Also, given the fact that there's a pretty stark difference in experience between them and the other two squads from VCS and LLA.
I think that's a fair assessment for sure. If you look at the other squads in the region, I mean, we already talked about how there's a bit of an asterisk on the attendance for Saigon Buffalo just because they weren't the ones to win. If you look at some of their players, they do have a few interesting champion picks. There's potential to surprise here. Maybe DFM, who of course are the kings of creativity that we saw at Worlds. We know that Evie was going to be bringing out some of the strange stuff. He of course played the Urgot even in the playoffs, I believe, for the LJL. Yeah, a couple of games on that champion. But for Saigon Buffaloes, for instance, Hazmed, he's brought out the Vayne once or twice. This is a region that still plays Gwen. I'm curious to see how that is actually going to work on the 12.8 meta
Mhm.
comparatively. And then for Team Ace, I think this is always going to be a tough climb. You know, the teams that are coming out of the Latin American regions always have a little bit of a struggle on the international stage up against the likes of some of these big names, whether it's coming out of the LJL, the LCK, or any of the major regions. So I think that's a little tough. I don't see how most of their roster is going to match up. And I definitely agree with you. I think this is a T1 win far and away. It's not just Faker. Of course, Kyria is kind of the big brains of the operation, as we've heard. And I think everybody else on this roster is incredible. DFM
Yep.
should take a number two. If anybody can challenge them, maybe it's Saigon Buffalo, but I think pound for pound, we're probably looking at that LCK and LJL top 1 and 2.
Yeah, I would have to, for the most part, agree with that sentiment. Of course, Saigon Buffalo and Team A's should be, they shouldn't count themselves out quite yet, but both of these teams do have chips on their shoulder, right? Because
Mhm.
Buffalo, of course, the number two squad. This is also VCS coming back onto the international
It is
stage.
nice to
So
see him back.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And they should be looking to try and sort of prove themselves in LLA time and time again. They've kind of been a disappointment on the international stage. So maybe A's are able to bring that little extra edge into MSI and maybe surprise us. But I think for the most part, Group A is pretty clear cut. But I think Group B is really the most interesting out of the
Ah,
groups.
ha, ha. We definitely got to get into that one. It's not just because it's PSG talent, right? It's because this is probably one of the closer ones when you look at the minor region teams and the major region teams, all things considered. But I think we do got to start with the big elephant in the room, if you will. It's the fact that we've got RNG versus PSG once again. But here's the thing: Zhao back in mid lane, so that changes the math a little bit on this one. The actual matchup, I think right now, the issue that PSG has is that their mid and jungle certainly can be slapped around a little bit by stronger players. I do worry a little bit for Bay up against Xiaohu. I think Gala and Ming have been more consistent than Unified and Kaiwing, so that's unfortunately probably a losing lane. But the X factor is going to be Hanabi, right? We've seen Hanabi just absolutely take off and tear it up in domestic region play, but up against the side of Ben, I think he could really carry it through. I mean, this is a guy whose most played champion in playoffs was like the Gragas, right? I think that Hanabi is certainly going to be somebody to watch, and if he can carry
Mhm.
his team to victory, maybe we get a surprise win over RNG there. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to necessarily give any false hope. It's not going to be easy, but PSG should get at least the number 2 seed coming out of this region. RNG should be getting the number 1 in my opinion, but I think there's enough there to maybe surprise in a couple of these best of ones.
Yeah, and I would say like overall, top to bottom, this group is pound for pound the strongest group because you look at RNG, very, very I mean they did win the LPL for good reason, strong top to bottom. PSG, very good as well. And when you look at the other two regions that you would classify as perhaps not making out of groups, Red Canids, they made it to the world stage. They have the carryover experience coming in from all their players from last year's Worlds coming into this year. So, they're going to be a little bit less shy this time around and being aggressive, making plays. So, they can have surprises. And Istanbul Wildcats has been one of the Turkish teams, at least a lot of the names on that squad that I have been watching about 2 years ago. I did have my eye on this squad, and they are very, very talented. We'll see how much of that they can showcase on the international stage, but certainly a team that can surprise. Given all that, I think PSG they should get a number 2 seed out of this, but I actually really like their chances to sneak away and take that first seed in this group. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and predict PSG 1, RNG 2 because uh, I think the meta is going to be a little bit slower, and this is a group that PSG might not necessarily get blown out of the water in the early game, and I think that really benefits them.
I think that is a very strong statement, but it's a very possible one, right? You do look at what RNG like to do in their matchups. I think this meta shift is probably going to favor PSG a little bit more. Of course, we've seen on 12.8 there are nerfs coming into the Xayah lethality build. That's something that Gala's played a heck of a lot. Obviously, every bot laner has played it a lot, but I think it's something that RNG in particular have found a lot of success on. They have a lot more of these like early game style ramp up champion choices. We see Xiaohu on the likes of the LeBlanc. We see him on the Vex as well as an assassin. Um, Again, I think the X factor for me in this matchup particularly, is going to be Hanabi versus Bin because I think that's where the strongest shift in favor of PSG comes in, and the fact that we are seeing much more fighters in the top side. It's something Hanabi has been successful at, and I expect it to continue. I'm gonna say they'll probably split games. In that double round robin, I think it's a 1-1. Now the question is, do any of these other teams surprise? Before we move on to Group C, I do want to give a little bit of a shout out to those other squads. You mentioned how Red Canids had experience carrying over from the
Mhm.
world stage. Looking at their play style, this is a team that plays a lot of Enchantress bot. They have a lot of Renata Glass games. They even played like the Yumi, the Seraphine over the course of their split in Brazil. I think this is a team that can get creative with composition. They may surprise a team like RNG or even like PSG if they can upset the apple cart early. So I think the team that loses to one of these squads, they're the ones that are probably going to find themselves in the second seed. For Istanbul Wildcats, they also have some veteran experience too. I'm especially looking at Holy Phoenix there in the bottom lane. He has been around for honestly forever, and
Forever.
if he can be the rock for the team, well, maybe there is a chance for the Turkish representatives. But that is enough for Group B. Let's go ahead and move on to our Group C. This is the small group. This is G2. This is Evil Geniuses, and this is Order from the LCO. So first and foremost, I think we definitely want to talk about those lower bracket runbacks. I mean, it is interesting that we're seeing quite the parallel there in teams that have managed to come out strong after stumbling early in the playoffs. Resilience counts for a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Order as well, like they actually had almost near perfect lower bracket run. They went 3-0 in their first three matches. It was only until the finals that they did drop games. And it was, of course, against the number one team in their region, the Chiefs. And even then, they still came out with the 3-2 victory. And I watched some of those games. They were pretty crazy, and I think overall, this group three or group C is going to be insanely crazy because Order, they like to fight. They come up with a lot of crazy stuff like the Twitch bot lane that they do enjoy picking up. And then you look at EG, G2, we know what G2 bring to the table. They love their creative picks. The EU as a region love to fight. And then we look at EG, of the NA teams, they are probably the most active NA team in just getting down and scrapping. So this is going to be very fight heavy, and I think it's also going to be a very early game focused driven group out of the all three groups.
Yeah, I think this will definitely be one of the faster ones, and not least because we have only 3 teams competing in it. I think that, you're right, it's very proactive, especially coming out of Evil Geniuses. Really impressive performance from them in the LCS finals when they managed to 3-0 100 Thieves, especially, homegrown talent. You know, you look at, Jojafin and Danny, they really popped off in that series, and it also shows why EG, put a lot of stock in investing in Inspired and getting him from Rogue last year, a very, very impressive standout
Mhm.
player in the summer, a MVP, if I recall correctly, and just loves these aggressive junglers that can dive in. Nocturne, very, very heavily played by him in the playoffs, as well as the Jarvan. I think really, though, what this roster is going to look to do is, as you mentioned, mix it up early, get a lot of plays. I think Danny has proven that he is insanely explosive on the likes of the Jinx. I wouldn't be surprised if teams ban that away, even after the health nerfs. I think it's still probably going to be a big one. So I'm going to make a bold prediction here, Nightstar. I think EG is the number one team in this group.
Yeah, I'm not quite on that same page. I still favor G2. I think the experience is going to be the difference here. Yes, there is a fair amount of experience on EG, but G2 just have it in spades. And they still also have a very, very good mid laner in Caps, which I think is really the recipe for success to be able to compete against EG. That's why TL, I think, did look somewhat good, even though they did get wiped out, of course. Uh, but I think that's going to be a secret to success. So I have G2 taking the one seed, EG taking the two seed here. Unfortunately, Order. Just don't I don't think that this is a team that's quite strong enough to be able to compete against these two teams, but they do have a decent amount of experience. So hopefully that helps them find an upset somewhere and help LCO make that Rumble stage. But I I don't think that's going to happen. So let's take a look at the Rumble stage then. Of course, I think our predictions are pretty much all lined up with what teams we actually expect to see in the Rumble stage. But how do you feel here about the 6 team stage?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even if we may not necessarily agree on the actual seeds, I think looking at the teams we expect to make it out, just to run down the line, it is T1, DFM, RNG, PSG, G2, and Evil Geniuses. So mostly all of our major region teams, plus the LGL, which has been kind of par for the course on the international stage for a little bit here. Looking at that, since we have this double round robin, things get a little bit more interesting because teams will be playing more games. That will be 10 total games as they play each of their opponents twice. I think in this stage, what's going to be really important is what teams take from the squads that they came out of the group with, right? Like what the results were and how they adapted, because they get to face that team 2 more times in addition to all the other squads. In terms of predictions, I think this is where it's going to get a little bit tighter, and I think the teams that are able to control the map a little bit better, rather than get off to those explosive early starts, are probably going to find more success. But it is still best of ones. So it's possible that you see a snowball game get out of control. I'm looking at the likes of Evil Geniuses in that regard. But for some of the slower teams, some of the more deliberate teams, I think that as long as they control the early game, we'll probably see them getting into the semifinals. So for a top four, I'm gonna say that I kind of expect. Ooh, because I predicted EG to make it out at first here, and now I'm
Mm,
thinking like if they are going to make it past, or if it's going to be G2. I'm actually going to say this is where DFM bow out. Unfortunately, because I think the competition getting tighter means they won't win as many games. I think RNG will make it through. So we got T1, we've got RNG. I think PSG are strong enough to be able to win more games than they're going to lose, and therefore they're going to get through on this one. And then the last spot has to go to. I got to be consistent here, Nightstar. I'm gonna give this to EG. I think G2 are going out in the Rumble stage.
all right.
I'm
Okay.
getting
So
crazy with it. Let's
predicting
go.
DFM and G2 to drop out here. I think when a lot of us people look at the teams that will probably be in the Rumble stage, you're looking at most likely PSG, DFM, and EG being the ones to compete for that fourth slot. I think most teams or most people would say that, hey, T1, RNG, G2, they're the ones that have secured a top three spot, and we should expect them to be in the bracket stage. But uh, I think it really just. I'm kind of riding the PSG high, Pyra. So let's go
A
with.
little bit of hopium. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll go with T1. We'll go with PSG. We'll go with. Huh. Let's go with EG.
Okay.
And then that means G2 or RNG won't make it out. And I'm going to go with
Ooh.
G2.
Okay. All right.
I
So we're
think
both making some
RNG,
bold predictions here.
yeah.
Okay.
I think this will be an extremely competitive Rumble stage, and I mean, my prediction of RNG not making out is probably not going to be a very popular opinion, but I think they've got a lot on their plate that they could definitely drop games here or there.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and maybe I'm being a little unnecessarily harsh on G2, but I think it is so close. It is such a toss up. I think the only thing that's for certain there is that's probably where we see our LJL representative bow out. But into the top four, we'll have to see. I think no matter what, it's the team to go out is probably going to be a toss up between G2, EG, and PSG. I think one of those three teams won't make it no matter what. But I'm definitely riding the Hopium hype train for PSG Talon if they can keep their form. Now, we won't necessarily know which seeds are fighting up against one another, so we have our top four relatively set. I know you said that it's going to include G2, and I said it's going to include RNG. Maybe we'll split the difference and just agree to disagree because we have to predict our finalist, our winner, who
Yes.
is going to take it all the way. Now, I don't think this is going to be a full win for PSG Talon. I think T1 are just too good. They're a cut above the rest when it comes to series, especially. I think they should be able to blaze their way through the semifinals and the finals to take the victory here. And that is going to be my prediction is T1 will be winning MSI 2022. What about you, Mr. Nightstar, before we close things out?
I think that T1 in their home region, surprise, surprise, they will be the ones to win in front of their home crowd. However, bold prediction, EG will be in the finals against them.
Oh, okay. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute, Nightstar. We've got we've got ping on this event. So maybe EG are going to be in their home element for a change, even though it's going to be in Korea. So I don't know. Anything's possible.
Yeah, it could be a very exciting time here for MSI. I mean, just the fact that EG and NA squad making it into finals. Yes, it happened before, but this is a completely different squad. But I have the belief.
We'll have to see which of our predictions end up coming true. And if you want to follow along all the action, make sure you tune in. You can get it all at lowlysports.com starting May 10th for MSI 2022. We'll see you then.